Okay, so this is my first, I guess, political talk video. I don't really know what to call this series. I just want to talk politics on my channel, and this is the first video I'm going to do about it. So, basically, just a subject I've want to talk about for a long time. I've said it a lot on YouTube and all that, so here we go. This is basically going to be a video in a few parts of me arguing the reasons for and the impacts of if all the U.S. territories became states. So I'm going to do this video in 4 parts. I'm going to give historical context first. I'm going to talk about my arguments for why they should become states. I'm going to talk about how, if they became states, how many votes they'd get if they became, and representatives they would get. And then, finally, how I think they would vote. Like I said, I just kind of have a few bullet points here about each topic, and we'll just see how it goes from here, and hopefully everyone likes it. Okay, part 1, historical context. So, earlier this year, it was revealed that at least 3,000 people have died in Puerto Rico as a result of Hurricane Maria. And the Trump administration has not had very good response or done very much to help the people of Puerto Rico, despite the fact they're American citizens. And once that was reported, it made me think to myself, why aren't the U.S. territories states yet? Like, what is the reason behind it? Because here's the thing, I'm from Texas, and last year we also had a hurricane. Florida also had a hurricane. The Carolinas are experiencing hurricanes earlier this month. So they've all gotten help from the federal government, just like Puerto Rico did. But they've gotten more in terms of funding and more effective responses than Puerto Rico got. So it made me wonder, what is the logic behind the territories not being states yet? Because yes, Puerto Rico is an island compared to the other places I said that experienced hurricanes. So the, I guess, help from the government was not as effective. But even then, it seems like most people, including some within our own government, don't realize Puerto Rico, much like other territories, the people there are American citizens. They are just as American as everybody else, even if they're on a territory. So it made me wonder, and this is the whole reason for this video, why not just make all the territory states already? Well, here's the thing. Some people actually don't know how many territories we have. Currently, we have 5, though I'm going to include a 6th. We have Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, and we have Washington, D.C. Now, technically, Washington, D.C. is not a territory, but it's also not a state. And here's how they're all kind of in the situation. We acquired Puerto Rico and Guam after the Spanish-American War. Denmark sold us the U.S. Virgin Islands, and we split half of them with the British. We got the Northern Mariana Islands from Japan after World War II. America Samoa, we also split it with Germany in 1899. And of course, Washington, D.C. is the nation's capital, but it's just one city. It's not an actual state. And Congress controls Washington, D.C. And those are the 6 territories we still had. But we used to have more. We had Cuba and the Philippines. Both were also acquired after the Spanish-American War in 1898 until they got their independence. The Panama Canal Zone, which was established in 1903 but abolished in 1979. And for a brief period, the nation of Liberia was a slave colony that we also had trade ports with until it got its independence in 1847. And if you look at the flag of Liberia, it looks like the U.S. flag just with 1 star. So we've always had territories, though some have gone independence over time, and these are the ones we still have. So I don't think they should be territories anymore. I think they should just become full states, like the 50 we have now. Okay, part 2, reasons for statehood. When you actually look at all the reasons for or against the territories in D.C. becoming states, you realize there are so many reasons for them to become states that it makes no sense why they're not already. I mean, think about it. If you're born in D.C. or any of the island territories, you're considered a U.S. citizen. Instead of American Samoa, they're called American nationals. Also, if you're born in D.C. or a territory, you can serve in any branch of the military. In fact, American Samoa, I believe, has the highest rate per capita of people who are veterans. Also, you use U.S. currency in all of the territories in D.C. They have already elected representatives. It's like just one person. They don't have any real say in the Congress, but they're still elected. And going back to what I said earlier, Washington, D.C. is actually kind of controlled by the Congress that we have, even though they do have an elected representative. Additionally, Washington, D.C. has 3 electoral votes, so they vote in general election, and all the territories can vote in the primaries. They just can't vote in the elections either. Finally, Puerto Rico has more people living in it than over 20 states, and Washington, D.C., despite the fact it's just one city, has more people living in it than Vermont and Wyoming. And yeah, there are a few counter-arguments as well. Like, there are some, I guess, forms of taxes they don't have to pay, but they also don't get some forms of Social Security, so there's a counter-argument to that. So really, for the most part, there is not really a strong argument as to why we just don't make these territories and D.C. states already. I've always used this analogy. If there's a party of 56 people, an all-you-can-eat buffet, and each person represents a state, the people representing Washington, D.C. and the 5 territories essentially only are allowed to use one plate, whereas the other 50 people can eat as much as they want. But it begs the question, what's the point of having just partial benefits being with all these other people? It feels like, why not just give them all the full benefits like everybody else? Part 3. Representation and electoral votes. Let's just say, for whatever reason, hypothetically speaking, before the 2020 census, the federal government made Washington, D.C. and the 5 island territory states. Just decided to do that. How would that impact the country? Well, since the 1920s, we've had the U.S. Congress set at 535 members. If we now had 56 states, we would have 112 senators, since every state gets 2. And the remaining 423 House members would be proportioned based on state's population. So, if we were to rank all the states from most populated to least populated, Puerto Rico would be the 30th with about 3.3 million people. Washington, D.C. would be the 50th with about 690,000 people. And Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands would be 53rd to 56th states respectively. So, how many representatives would they get if they became states? Puerto Rico would have 2 senators and 5 House members, which is 7 electoral votes. Washington, D.C. would get 2 senators and 2 House members, which is 4 electoral votes. And the other 4 territories would get 2 senators and 1 congressman, which would be 3 electoral votes. Alright, fourth and final point, how they would vote. So, one of the biggest arguments, particularly Republicans make, against D.C. and the territories becoming states is that they'd overwhelmingly vote Democrat. And to a small extent, I can see why that argument was initially true. And this was the hardest part of the video because I had to do a lot of research for this one. But yes, they would lean Democrat, but I don't think it'd be as big as a blowout as Republicans make it sound. Now, what I did for this part was I looked at the governors and the elected representative of D.C. and the territories going back the last 20 years. And I kind of looked at how basically they voted, also in primaries, to determine how I think they'd vote if they became states. So, Washington, D.C. has had a Democratic representative and Democratic mayor for decades. So, if it had 4 votes, I'm pretty sure all 4 members of Congress they had would be Democrat. The 2 senators and 2 House members, I'm pretty sure would all be Democrat. Puerto Rico, currently their representative is a Republican, but the previous 2 were Democrat. And the current governor is a Democrat. So, I feel like it would be leaning blue, especially following what has happened with the Trump administration and how they've responded to Hurricane Harvey. But because it's such a large island territory compared to the rest, I think Republicans, even if they had just a small percentage of the vote, they could probably still get a member or 2 in there. So I think they might get 5 Democrats representing the state and 2 Republicans. So yeah, it would still lean fairly blue. U.S. Virgin Islands, though, are a bit more tricky. The current representative is a Democrat, and the last 2 were Democrat, but the current governor is an independent, and the previous governor before that was a Democrat. So, the territory would probably go Democrat as well, but maybe there could be an independent here, but I'm just going to say all 3 would be Democrat. Guam, also their current representative is Democrat, but the current governor is a Republican, as well as 2 as the previous 3 before that. So, I do think the state of Guam would lean slightly more Republican. So maybe it'd have 1 vote for Democrats and 2 representative votes who are Republican. Northern Mariana Islands, their current representative is an independent who was formerly Democrat, but the previous one was a Republican. And the current governor is Republican, as well as the last, I think, 3 governors of the island were Republican. So if it was a state, I think it would be the most Republican friendly. Like, all three of the representatives would be Republican. Finally, American Samoa. The current representative is a Republican, but the previous one was a Democrat, and the current governor is also a Democrat as well as the last two. So I do think it would also lean Democrat, but maybe Republican could get a representative here, so it'd get 2 votes Democrat and 1 vote Republican. So, yes, if the DC and the 5 island territories became states, they would lean mostly Democrat. But Republicans could get a couple of votes here and there, so I can see where that argument is true, but at the same time, if the Republicans do get a few votes here and there, it's not as big as a blowout as some people say. Okay, so in conclusion, I argue the federal government should just make Washington, D.C. and the 5 island territory states already. Ultimately, I don't see why they're not. I mean, they've been territories for so long that the people there feel like they're Americans in all but name, but the people of the rest of the United States don't see it as such. And really, when you actually look at the list of reasons why, they should just be states. They're in states all but name. They benefit from being territories, but they don't have their voices heard properly because they can't vote in elections and they can't have proper representation in Congress. And yeah, sure, maybe some of them or most of them would even want to vote Democrat if they became states, but political ideologies and viewpoints change all the time. So maybe down the road some of them would vote Republican. But these are our fellow Americans, and they deserve the same equal treatment as everyone else in the mainland United States. So, and I know that it's probably never going to happen under this administration, but I am hopeful that one day we as this country is like, you know what, let's help our fellow Americans by treating them as our equals and granting them full statehood. Because frankly, that's what they deserve. Alright, well, that's all I got today for this video. Like, share, and subscribe, and check out some of the other videos on my channel. And I'll see you next time. Later.